We will not bow down. Let my people go. We will not bow down. Let my people go. We will not bow down. Let my people go. We will not bow down. Let my people go. We will not bow down.
Well, hello and welcome to episode 74 of the Croydon Constitutionalist podcast, bringing classical liberalism to South London and beyond via our YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. My name is Dan Heaton and my partner in podcasting today is Mike Swadling, the co-founder of the Croydon Constitutionalist. Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Dan. Welcome, and good to be back recording.
Well, we're delighted to be joined today once again by Chris Wilkinson, the founder of Blacklist Press and recently a founding member of the Choice Party. Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me.
Now, whilst we won't be discussing it today, it would be remiss of us not to mention the recent passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II after 70 years on the throne. Whilst not entirely unexpected news, it still came as something of a shock. I know that I speak for all associated with the Croydon Constitutionalists when I say that our sympathy is with the royal family and those who were close to Her Majesty at this difficult time. We would like to thank her for her 70 years of devoted service to our country and the Commonwealth and wish King Charles III a long and successful reign. So, Mike, what have we got to talk about today?
Well, apart from obviously the very sad news about our Queen, our news today, items of covering today, we've had a new Prime Minister. So we'll be talking about Liz Truss and the new cabinet. We all know the big news item that we will soon be getting back to is the cost of living crisis, and we'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about the Choice Party that Dan's just mentioned with regard to Chris, and we'll be having a chat with Chris about Blacklist Press, his publishing organisation.
Well, yes, it's been rather overshadowed by recent events. But Liz Truss did win the leadership of the Conservative Party and is now the Prime Minister. She met the Queen a couple of days before her sad passing and was handed the reins, as it were. And she has put in place her new cabinet. Seems to me it's a very Liz loyalist cabinet. But I suppose, given that we are where we are, and with only probably a couple of years at the most until the next general election, I don't really see that there's much room for dissent. Mike, what have you made of the cabinet appointments?
Well, firstly, just looking this up, a little fact I hadn't really fully appreciated was, according to Wikipedia, the cabinet was first formed in 1644, over 378 years ago. So it was I hadn't quite realised how long an institution that had been going for. First thing, I think, I guess no one's surprised that Liz Truss won the Conservative leadership contest. That was well understood pretty early days, once the final two had been selected. I have a natural disappointment. I dare say some of our listeners will understand here. This is the first Prime Minister in my lifetime who's younger than me. And as I look around the cabinet, quite a few of them are younger than me. Most amazingly, or not perhaps amazingly is the wrong word, but most shockingly was the Environment Minister, who appears to be born in a year I remember exceedingly well. So, some of these things are there's definitely a new generation coming in. Which no doubt is good, not actually that young a generation, but yeah, there we go. In terms of the cabinet, not always great surprises. Quite a lot of signposting went on, and as you would expect when it was such a likelihood that Liz would win the election. I like Suella Braverman. I'm incredibly happy to see her in the Home Office. I think that's a really good appointment. And it builds on where she'd been Attorney General before. I think there's a good kind of transition in terms of the role there. And I think it's really interesting to see Kemi Badenoch in as Secretary of State for International Trade. Now, given that she had come across as such a sort of cultural warrior previously, this isn't that sort of job. It's a more shall we say, formalized job. There's not quite so much politicking directly in it, but that might be good for her in terms of building her career. There's a lot of people predicting she will be the future leader of the Conservative Party, and maybe being given a weighty job and a chance to prove herself in that sort of field, her first cabinet role might be a very good thing for the future. Obviously, beyond that, there's a number of faces we knew. I've always liked James Cleverly. I think it's good to see him appointed as the Foreign Secretary. And I can't say I knew a lot about Kwasi Kwarteng before recent events, but the more I learn, we seem to have a chancellor that actually understands the Laffer curve. I think that's a very positive step, Dan.
Indeed, the Laffer curve is a welcome topic of conversation. Chris, what have you made of the appointments?
Well, I think when we knew it was going to be Rishi or Liz, I think there was a general idea that neither of them were particularly well suited to take over. And just look at what a baptism of fire Liz has had to deal with, because we've got the energy crisis, we've got prices rising, there's a background of summer strikes and political scandal, and then of course the death of the Queen. I suppose there is a glimmer of hope with the likes of Kemi Badenoch, and if you look at the final YouGov and Conservative home polls that were taken before the leadership result, Kemi was getting 24% to Penny Mordaunt's 20% in the YouGov poll, and 31% to Truss's 20% in Conservative homes. So there's definitely going to be good things in store for her. I'm surprised actually that she was only offered the President of the Board of Trade and Secretary of State for International Trade, because she could very well have been offered Chief Secretary to the Treasury with poll ratings like that, but maybe experience may have played a part there. I agree with a lot of what Mike's just said there. No real surprises. Theresa Coffey is Deputy Prime Minister. She was a key backer of Liz Truss. James Cleverly as Foreign Secretary. He's got very good prior experience. He served as a Lieutenant Colonel, I believe, and Ben Wallace at Defence. He's been in that position for about 3 years, I think. I think there was another sort of key factor to all this. It is the end of the sort of globalist set in the cabinet, because Rishi hasn't been offered a position. And it is quite surprising, really, because he was the person who won the MP's ballot. He won 137 to 113. And if you look at his ratings among members, he got over 60,000 votes, and that makes him more popular than Jeremy Hunt was in 2019, when he scored 44,500. He's roughly equal in popularity to David Davis when he stood for the position in 2005. But of course, Rishi's percentage is a lot higher now than either of the others were. So he clearly possessed a popularity within the party, and I do speculate whether his absence from cabinet, along with the absence of many of his supporters, may actually cause tensions within the government, certainly on the backbench, as time goes on.
Yeah, as you say, Chris, it is a baptism of fire. There's a heck of a lot to sort out, and not very long to do it from a political perspective if you want to get re-elected in a couple of years' time. Yeah, Rishi's back on the backbenches. I think it would be unwise of him to look to cause trouble or to sit there sulking. But it became quite obvious, I think, during the campaign that he was very unlikely to he probably even accept a position should he be offered it in a Liz Truss cabinet. I think one person I'm pleased to see is Jacob Rees-Mogg in the Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. This could be very interesting in the near future. We'll see what he does to deregulate now that we've left the European Union. So that's a good position. And one thing I will say is without any women-only shortlists or anything like that, we do have it must be the most, and using the words of our perhaps our political opponents, the most diverse cabinet I've ever seen in terms of those identities as the left talk about. Obviously it's the third female prime minister, and Labour still haven't had a female leader, which I'm sure will rankle many socialists out there. Early days, but it's been there's been some good noises, I think. We'll have to see what happens, but I think the online harms bill may get quietly binned by the look of it, but we will have to see. Mike, your local MP has been brought into the cabinet.
He has indeed. Chris Philp will be attending cabinet as Chief Secretary to the Treasury. Chris is a self-made businessman, has done very well for himself, and I have to say is an incredibly committed and enthusiastic local MP in a constituency where, he could frankly get away with being less so. I live in a very conservative area, but Chris hasn't let that fact rest. He works very hard. He is sort of a voracious worker with a huge amount of energy, and it's not just what I've seen. This is something that's been said to me by many people who I thought had a lot of energy. So Chris has done very well for himself. I think he's been the minister for going on and saying unpleasant things or making a fool of yourself, perhaps one might say, on the telly. He's been given a lot of rough jobs over recent years, and I wouldn't necessarily say I agree with the way he's undertaken them, but I think as a party man, he's definitely proven himself, which is maybe why he's got that role there. He did vote Remain, but I think from a Treasury perspective, someone who's got a business background is an entrepreneurial background is a very positive thing. So yeah, pleased to see him there. Just going back, Dan, you mentioned that the cabinet has changed a lot, and the Rishi loyalists have kind of gone. Sorry, the globalists. In fact, Chris, you said this. The globalists have gone. I think it's really obvious that the current game plan isn't working. It wasn't just the cake gate for Boris, although that's an important thing. We're now facing a major financial crisis due to lockdown. We've got an energy crisis due to years of green policies. And we've not had GDP growth really in any substantive way since the financial crisis. So everything we're doing isn't working. And actually a radical change, and I'm not saying they're going to do it. We've been let down by this Conservative government before, but a radical change at the top and in terms of the look and feel of the cabinet was not just represents a change of leader. I think it was absolutely necessary. They've got any chance of the next election.
Indeed. Well, we'll have to see how they get on. But one of the things that is facing the new prime minister and this new cabinet is obviously the cost of living crisis. Inflation's been going up quite a lot, to say the least, especially compared to where it has been for decades. And a large part of that is to do with energy prices. Of course, there is some impact of the war in Ukraine, but Mike, as you alluded to, there's been a build-up in the market in relation to the green policies that have been in place and indeed have cross-party support and have been in place for a number of years now. Well, one of the first announcements that Liz Truss made was in respect to bringing in a cap or a new cap, or I don't know, we have an energy price cap apparently, but it was due to go up. It's already gone up, but it's due to go up even more significantly in October. But apparently we're going to cap those prices, but we're going to borrow quite a lot of money in order to fund the gap between whatever that cap is and whatever the if you like, the real market rate is that the suppliers would have been charging. Mike, we've not seen all the details of this policy, as we say, because the policy was announced and then unfortunately the Queen passed away. But what have you made of it so far?
There's a really unfortunate set of choices for a new Prime Minister to face. It's hard to know what Liz Truss could have done. Affecting prices in the market, government price caps are a terrible idea and they should never happen. Equally, were you in that position, would you allow to go into the winter months whereby millions, frankly, tens of millions of people in this country will be afraid to heat their homes, and there will be a knock-on effect on deaths as a really direct result of that because of the price of energy, and indeed we will likely see loads of businesses go under because of the price of energy. So I, you know, it's hard to know what else she could have done. The really big balancing act with this, and I don't pretend to have the detailed knowledge. I'm not sure anyone has at this stage as to what you can do about this, which is there's a real risk we run out of energy this winter. And that's, you know, don't worry about prices. What happens when you turn on the gas or turn on the electric and it's simply not coming down the line to you? You know, that's a really terrifying thought for, I think, many of us this year. So that's got to be their first requirement, is to make sure that the suppliers are here and that we can manage them. And frankly, part of managing them is pushing up the price slightly. It is saying, you know, don't have your heating on for a couple of hours in the morning, have it on for an hour. You know, don't turn down the radiator, put on the jumper, all of those kind of cliched things, but certainly things I used to do more in my youth, and then I just turned on the heating, you know, more recently. So maybe not this winter. So that's there's got to be a balance to it. I am terrified by the amount of money. The amount, 130 billion pounds I saw quoted. That's something like 2/3 of what we spend on health and social care. It's more than twice what we spend on education. 8 times what we spend on the Home Office. 3 times what we spend, 3 and a bit times what we spend on defence, and so on and so forth. This is a huge amount of money by any measure. And is just 1 year enough? Can we do something about it to stop it in the future? I think those are kind of really key questions, but I don't like it. I don't think it's a good idea. Equally, I'm not sure, frankly, she had any choice.
Chris, I dare say you would be opposed to price fixing in principle. But as Mike said, in the short term, I'm not sure from a political perspective and a practical perspective, there's that much that could be done in the short term. What do you think about it all?
I agree. I think we've been boxed in by years of bad policy making in terms of energy. If you actually look at the figures, UK domestic energy production has been falling consistently in every year since 2005, yet no government, neither Labour nor Conservative, has actually done anything about it. I would actually disagree with one thing though, and that's the idea that we should somehow blame the cost of living crisis on what's going on in Ukraine. I don't agree with that, because about 8% of our fuel use comes from Russia, really. We actually supply, we get our supplies more so from North Sea oil and gas, and we import the rest from places like Qatar, the Netherlands and Sweden, I believe. So I don't know. I think that's been sort of used as a scapegoat to try and rationalize what's going on. If you look at the more sort of international picture, places like Japan, Indonesia and Switzerland all have inflation of under 5%, yet ours is about to blow out to potentially up to 20%. Funnily enough, Nigel Farage did a video, an interview with The Telegraph recently. And I agree with absolutely everything with what he said in that. I think his skills for analysis and in terms of this situation of absolutely on point. it's probably worth explaining what inflation is. And I don't mean to sort of steal too much of Gareth Seward's thunder or anything. He's wrote a book on this. But inflation really, I think, is the cause of higher prices, not really the effect of it. If you look at the Bank of England's domestic money supply, it increased by a third between January 2020 and January 2022. Now, by any measure, that's going to have an effect. The demand for money during that period actually fell, but because the Bank of England increased its quantitative easing program by 450 billion during that time, it sort of made up for the loss of GDP. But within that, there was no extra production or anything. It's just an artificially higher price level to protect against the lost output, which in the short term, you know, you might not really see it or notice it, but in the long term, it will have very serious negative effects. And quantitative easing, for those who don't know, is basically where the state prints money, purchases bonds such as pension funds or other financial assets, and they use that as a substitute for the cash that they've printed. So you make the economy cash rich, in inverted speech marks, and asset poor. And as I say, yeah, in the long term, it can cause a severe economic problem, which is probably what we're seeing now. And I think, you know, a lot of these sort of economic terms become jargonistic, but if you think of money as a liquid, and goods and services are like sponges. So long as there are enough goods and services in your economy being produced, all of the liquid money can be absorbed with no puddles left over. The problem comes when you've got too few sponges as a result of, you know, lost productive potential from falling output, and that's been compounded by world trade problems and the asset poor nature of the economy. So you're left over with too much liquid money and too few goods and services to absorb it all. And then you're left with the pool of cash left over. And of course, as Gareth would say, the more of something you have, the less valuable it is. So that pool of money left over is reducing the value of money. And that's what's causing the price level to rise. And as we've seen, I think it was November last year, the Bank of England has finally admitted that they've gone too far with money printing. They did it quietly. They announced the process of quantitative tightening, which will unwind this process somewhat. But we're in a position now where the economy is in such a state that they can't do that without causing a very significant serious depression.
And some of us will remember the early 80s. I won't pretend to remember it amazingly well, but the tightening of M6 led to a sharp contraction. Now that also led to the boom at the end of the 80s and all through the 90s, and indeed the early 2000s. We saw really good economic growth. Almost, there were recessions and there were problems, but generally a pretty strong upward trend, because we had control of inflation, we had control of our money supply. But that was a very hard time to start with, Chris, and as you've mentioned there, and dare say we might see the same thing.
Well, you can't get a better example of inflationary policy, really, than paying people not to work on a massive scale for a prolonged period of time. And that's what the furlough scheme effectively was. So, this all goes back to, in some respects, all goes back to the lockdown and the policies around that. And of course, that, different countries dealt with that in different ways. They had support schemes or not, depending on where they were, and the lockdowns were more or less severe. And even in America, it was different in different states to a great extent. But those inflationary pressures have been building up for some time. And then obviously with the the Green lobby and what they've been doing over the past decade or so, totally basically messed up our own energy production. For mine, in terms of the longer term issues around energy production, I think we need to get fracking and possibly in the that's not a short term fix, because you can't just start to drilling overnight. It takes some time to get up and running, but then I think in the longer term it may be a sensible thing to have that conversation about nuclear energy. Something the Green Party and the activists who claim not to want to put carbon dioxide into the environment, and yet seem to also be against nuclear. So it's some difficult decisions to make, but hopefully we'll see. We've seen officially the ban on fracking lifted, albeit we'll see how that works out in the communities where it might take place. But I think in the longer term, that's something that we're just gonna have to do. So, Chris, you've recently been involved in the setting up of a new political party. What's all that about then?
Yes, so the Choice Party. I think for a long time I thought that going independent would be the way to go about this, but I think it's become clear in my mind that we need to sort of break out of our own sort of post-LP UK or post-SLP qualms and try something a bit different for once. I do, of course, recognise the sort of value of association and organisation. And so I've been involving myself in helping set up the Choice Party. It's early days at the moment, but we're sort of working everything out at the moment. I think there's, when people start smaller parties, they tend to be too party-like and emulate the larger successful parties. I think that's a mistake that we are determined to avoid, and we're going to go down a very different road with this. And as well, there is an appeal of decentralization and local autonomy and local representation, with no sort of centralized offices or hidden expenses or anything. Everything should be transparent and accessible. And that's really what the Choice Party is going to be all about. And I think also the party should be more than just politics. I think really Choice will embody the kind of country that its members want to create. So the things that we're doing differently include using a business to serve its interests. We're going to foster a very good social atmosphere. We're going to be putting events on online at the moment, but maybe physically later, and setting smaller achievable targets rather than having any sort of grand sweeping visions for how we're going to change the country or anything like that. So nothing too overtly political or anything like that. And using all of these tools, people will see that the party has a very clear identity, a very good, strong set of values. We're just going through the constitution at the moment and stress testing it. And we're trying to work out all of the key points that we want to make. The constitution, incidentally, is going to be a constitution in the proper sense, rather than enabling people to get away with things. It's going to be a restricting document. So anyone who's a party officer or a representative will have very clear rules and responsibilities to follow. And really, I think, that's one of the key things to rebuild trust in politics, and certainly trust in a new small party. It'll be something that I think will change the minds of voters. And the more that they see a party which has an influence and a genuine care for local communities and economies, they'll see that there's a difference there. And that's, in time, that will lead to better things and bums on seats, really, in terms of elections.
So what are the main sort of issues that that the Choice will be taking on?
Well, at the moment, obviously we haven't got the constitution fully set up, but we can talk about some of the early policies that we've got. One of which is providing a genuine right to buy scheme. So whereas in the past the housing stock was sold off at the discounts and not replenished, one of our policies would be to replenish all property types in all areas, because we do believe, as the name suggests, in genuine choice. The Choice company, the business which is going to be attached to the party, will be acting to offer this scheme to current council tenants as and when funding allows. I'd personally like to see all the barriers to the property market, like the deposit requirements, entirely eliminated. But I guess that policy will have to wait for when we're given office. And the other thing, I suppose, is that the local leaders will be able to set their own policies for their own areas. So there's no sort of top-down policy making in the Choice Party. It's going to be served by an admin team. So if you choose to be a representative or an activist, you'll be served by an admin team, which will use the latest technology available to us and enable representatives to really get on with their jobs of doing the important things and reaching out and connecting with people, which we also think is very important. And in time, the representatives will all be self-funded eventually, so there won't be any of these expenses or even salaries being paid out to extravagant levels. It'll all be a self-funded operation.
So who else is involved in the party thus far?
So at the moment we've got Kieran. He's the treasurer of the party and studiously working away with the budget and seeing what we can afford. The director of member services is Stephen McNamara, who you may have known from Scottish Libertarian Party and other things. He will be involved with the business side of it, and that will be, helping us to do our jobs as well as we can do them. And really, at the moment, it's predominantly in Scotland. That's where we're sort of setting it up at the moment. We're targeting every single seat in Holyrood for the 2026 election. And if possible, we would like to get 26 candidates for the London Assembly elections in 2024. So if you know anyone, swing them our way and we can get talking to them. But there's exciting times ahead. It's early days, as I say, but there's a lot to build from.
And if anybody wants to keep an eye on yourselves, what's the best website or Twitter handle or whatever to keep in touch with you?
So the website is choiceparty.org. We're also on Facebook, facebook.com/choicepartyuk, and on Twitter, choice_party_UK.
Excellent. Well, we'll watch this space, and no doubt we'll be in touch to see how things are going in the near future. So, Mike, I think you've got a few more questions for Chris.
I do indeed. So, for those of you who get our email or see us on social media, you'll know that I've particularly been writing for a publication called Free Speech, and put out by Blacklist Press, which something Chris set up and runs. And this is a bi-weekly newsletter that goes out with articles about free speech and often has articles from myself and other people mentioned on today's podcast. But there's more happening on Blacklist Press, so we want to ask Chris a little bit about that. And I think for those of you who are interested in sort of libertarian and classical liberal type politics, it may be of interest to you. So, Chris, you've set up this company. How did that come about?
So I think it was during the second lockdown. I was contemplating things to do, and one of my ambitions was to set up a publishing company. So I did, and that was set up in November 2020. I think really because I've been interested in writing for a long time. I've been writing poetry for 9 years, haven't released anything yet. I should really get around to doing that, and I certainly will now. But writing's been a long-term interest in me, and obviously having gone to university as well, studying history and politics, I thought maybe there was a demand for a publishing company that embodies libertarian political and historical values, and that's really what led to the creation of Blacklist Press. As the name suggests, a lot of the people who have libertarian views find themselves either blacklisted or shadow banned or something like that. So it's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek reference to our own state of affairs, really.
Indeed, yes, yes. Ode to live in free times again. So you obviously, we mentioned this newsletter you publish, and among other things, and you published some of my pieces, as mentioned, and some of the pieces from our My Tuppence Worth event. So those people that weren't able to attend that, or indeed were able to, might want to read them as they come out. How do people? Firstly, how's the newsletter going, and how do people get a copy if they'd like to?
So the newsletter has been going now for, I think, 24 editions at the time of this podcast, and it's about to have its 25th. I did start it off as a weekly thing, but I thought that because of work and other commitments, then it's probably best to do it as a bi-weekly thing, as you say. And yeah, we've been reaching out to I think it's about 10,000 people now, 10,000 individual views. Obviously, they may not be the same people, or maybe we're reaching new markets. But yeah, with the putting the articles on the website now, which has been a thing that I've recently done in the past couple of weeks, we're getting more and more people involved, and the interest certainly is building. Yeah, people can go to the Blacklist Press website, which is blacklistpress.com, and go onto the tab which says free speech, and you should be able to see the latest edition there. Alternatively, I think it's visible on the blog on the website as well. But I distribute these things on social media. I know you do as well, Mike. So anyone who doesn't see it there might see it on Facebook or on Twitter. Blacklist Press has its own social media outlets there as well.
No, excellent. Well, you're moving on from just the newsletter, and you're publishing a new book on John Smith, indeed writing a book on John Smith, which will assess the life and legacy of Labour's lost leader. Now, I might be wrong in saying this, but I'm not sure you were around when John Smith was leader of the Labour Party, and certainly you've been very, very young. So what inspired you to write about the late Labour leader?
Quite true. He was just before my time. I suppose really it's the culmination of something which I really wanted to do in the final year I spent at university. And I thought now, what with the publishing company in situ, now would be the best time to do it. Really, the motivation is intrigue, really. The guy spent 2 years as Labour leader until he suddenly died of a heart attack, and he never managed to get round to any sort of major election. So there is always the question of, would he have actually won a general election or anything like that? And I suppose, yeah, that sort of the mystery of the man is the most motivating thing, because even now most people wouldn't recognize who he is, really. He seems to have been overlooked, I think, quite unfairly. because when you look into the detail of it, you actually realise he's quite responsible for New Labour's election victory in 1997, and I just don't think he's given the attention or credit that he should perhaps be given. And you'll see more in the book when it's released. I've spent time interviewing Neil Kinnock, who was obviously the Labour leader before him. Brian Gould, who was campaign coordinator in the 87 and 92 elections for Labour, and someone who's quite an authority on the times and the development of Labour in opposition during that time is Dr. Patrick Diamond, and I've interviewed him as well. So there'll be references to these three people in the book. Very grateful as well to Labour Party's archive in Manchester. I spent 4 days down there in June, or rather up there, because it's more north than me. But yeah, so it's been quite an intense process, and I'm kind of looking forward to the book finally being finished, and sort of closing off 3 years of ambition and hard work.
Fascinating. Yeah. You obviously had some interaction with Lord Kinnock and Brian Gould. How were they, or any sort of stories or thoughts from that?
Yeah, well, Neil Kinnock spent about 10 minutes trying to reconnect his phone because he'd dropped it. So that was, yeah, I mean, honestly, they're very nice people. Kinnock, I think, he still talks like a leader almost. You know, I think Brian Gould, funnily enough, was the one who said he uses leader speak, and that certainly is true. Brian Gould, I got on with rather well in the capacity of an interviewer. I think he's much more my kind of temperament, and yeah, generally, you know, quite intellectual and very well thought out positions on both of their sides. And then of course Patrick Diamond, who sort of you know, gelled it all together for me, and in my mind sort of made me connect the dots, as it were, and helped me to understand why they've said the things that they've said, really. But yeah, it's been a positive experience from start to finish.
That's excellent. There's an interesting, I suppose, simile to our current time there as well, isn't there? Which is Neil Kinnock became the leader after Michael Foot, and went an awfully long way to detoxifying the Labour Party. We have a similar situation with Keir Starmer doing that post Jeremy Corbyn. I'm not sure, and maybe you only see this in retrospect, but I'm not sure we see in the Labour Party today some of the big figures around them that helped with that process, like Brian Gould, like Peter Mandelson, and as you say, John Smith. You know, if Neil Kinnock detoxified the party, John Smith made it look like a party of government. Now, obviously, what Blair went on to achieve was quite stunning, but yeah, he took that important first step. But yeah, I don't know if you can think of anyone, or Dan, but it's hard to see that intellectual weight in the Labour Party that we had in that period from sort of 87 through to, say, 93, 94.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think one of the sort of mistakes, certainly when Keir Starmer became the leader of the Labour Party, there were many people in the party that said, oh, he's just like John Smith. He's going to sort it all out. He's going to save the party. And what we've seen in the 2.5 years subsequent to his election is nothing of the sort, really. So it is trying to raise the profile of John Smith in the past, but also trying to recognise the differences that exist between that past and the present that we face in the Labour Party of today.
Indeed. So the book comes out on the 24th of September. How do people get a copy?
So it'll be available first of all as an ebook, and that will be again on blacklistpress.com. And I think very shortly afterwards there will be the print book, which I've got to sort out and buy the ISBNs and barcodes for it. But that should be out very shortly afterwards, October, I'd say. But look out for us on the website, and I'll be promoting it as best I can.
Excellent. We look forward to it.
Really look forward to getting my signed, personalised copy of the hardback, as it were.
Might have to wait a bit longer for that one.
So, Mike, we've got a couple of things on our website, and we've got a couple of upcoming events. Why don't you tell the listeners about them?
We have indeed. So, firstly, on the website, I've written an article about Britain suffering from a lack of Ronseal quick drying wood stain. Now, I hope you DIY enthusiasts don't fret too much. It's really referring to the 90s advert about Ronseal quick drying wood stain that mentioned it does exactly what it says on the tin. And it's pointing out how little in government does that. We've already spoken a bit about this today. Quote from the article: "I don't feel we'd have this problem if I worked for the government. I mean, for starters, you don't seem to have anything that works." And that's really the situation where government is today. Clearly, things may turn around, but I hope you'd have a read and see what you think of some of the things I see there as problems in our current situation. Then I've got a couple of articles up, one actually on the website, but they post some old articles about Croydon Council that were initially published in the Croydon Citizen. Potholes and pointless art was one, and what kind of Croydon do you want to live in? Both from before the last local elections, looking at and indeed one before the elections before that, looking at what kind of Croydon we wanted to live in, what the council needs to change, and looking at some of the misspend by Croydon Council, the last Labour administration, and some of its failings. Really, I think still relevant, which is one of the reasons I was able to republish them, because things hadn't changed in that intervening 4 years, and there's lots for the new mayor to do. So yeah, please look them up and let us know if you've got any views on them. But it's not just that, and there's a place you can let us know about them, and that's up on our upcoming event. So first of all, this Wednesday coming, and maybe just about as you hear this, Wednesday, the 21st of September, we've got our no passport required drinks. So that's our third Wednesday drinks that happen every month. 7 p.m. in the George in Croydon. That's Wednesday, the 21st of September. Be great to see you there. And then a week later, we've got our climate, rational action and affordability discussion. That's Wednesday, the 28th of September, and that's at Elliot's Bar in Purley. So that's upstairs from 7 p.m. We've got Harry Wilkinson, the head of policy at Net Zero Watch, speaking. We also have a representative from the Taxpayers Alliance talking about their views on net zero. I think we might be fair to say it will be a sceptical view of global warming and our response to it. But both from a kind of scientific and legislative net zero perspective and a taxation perspective. So that's 7 p.m, Wednesday, the 28th of September, upstairs at Elliot's Bar in Purley. It'd be great to see you there. Two really great speakers, really knowledgeable on their subjects, and a little bit of a Q&A afterwards. Be great. I think it'll be a really good evening for all to attend.
Yes, really looking forward to those two upcoming events. Well, if you'd like to write for our website or have any stories that you'd like us to cover, please do contact us. You can do so via the Twitter at CroydonConst, via our Facebook page, via our website, croydonconstitutionalist.uk, or via email, croydonconstitutionalist@gmail.com. Well, do please subscribe to the podcast and the YouTube channel. Do please like, share, and leave a review. It's always good to get feedback, and it helps others to find the podcast. Well, thank you very much, Chris, for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
And thank you to everybody for listening. Until next time, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me.
God save the King.